Hello and welcome back to the Jacob and Jacob podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Robam, joined as always by my co-host, Jacob Hare. And today we are very lucky to be joined by Ari Meirov, who covers all 32 NFL teams for Pro Football Focus. Ari, thank you for being here today.
For sure, guys. Jacob, thanks for having me on. Love the podcast name. I think it's amazing. If you guys could find another Ari, maybe I'll make another podcast of my own with Ari and Ari. So thanks for having me on. And the football season is almost here. So really excited about that.
For sure, for sure. So before we get into the football talk, I got to ask you, how did you end up working with PFF Pro Football Focus? You went from running your own sort of Twitter page, and to be honest, didn't really know your name until recently, and then you turned over, you joined PFF, and now how did that happen?
Yeah, for sure. It's an interesting story because I've been running this Twitter account called My Sports Update since 2013, which really just started because, football is obviously the biggest sport in America. Everybody follows it, everybody's interested in it. But, there's no real page where you're able to find all the relevant and notable stuff at one page because there are so many different reporters reporting on stuff that if you're the guy who goes to school or if you're the guy who's working, like, how are you keeping track of everything that you want to know about? So that's really what I did. And I started in 2013. Over time, it just kept on growing and growing to a point where agents and reporters and coaches and players started following. I was like, whoa, I got something going over here. And then eventually, I bumped into a couple of people that I really, really respected. And then, I've been getting a lot of different people who are interested in saying, hey, maybe join us what we're doing. And nothing really fit what I was looking for. I like doing it independently. But then PFF came along this year, and we all know PFF is all about data and analytics and all of that. But they're like, hey, we want to start a news division as well. And I was like, that sounds pretty interesting. That's all right up my alley. And they're like, we want you to be the guy who runs everything there for our news. And I was like, if we can make something work, I mean, I think this could be a really good idea because really every team uses PFF, every agent uses PFF for their data because, we all watch the games, but what else is actually going on? What's really happening? The numbers don't say everything when you look at the box score. They know exactly what's going on. They have so many people working here, but then they want to add a news aspect and like, Ari, we think you'll be the right guy. So we're able to find something that makes sense. And now I'm with them and we're gonna build our own news division as well and try to, be one of the ESPNs and NFL networks as well when it comes to that. So, it's a pretty cool thing. Yeah.
So before Pro Football Focus, were you doing anything else on top of Twitter, maybe like as a job for work?
Yeah, I was. So I was always doing the Twitter, which was a side hustle, if I'm going to be honest. I was doing real estate, which was my main thing. And, I would be showing houses and showing other stuff and doing rentals and those type of things, as my main focus. But I was always having, my phone and being around my computer to make sure to see what's going on. So I've always had that. But grateful. I mean, a great thing for me is that now that I've joined PFF, I'm able to drop the real estate and just focus on this solely, which is obviously one of the main things they wanted in order to join a company. And they were like, we'll be able to do that. So I no longer am involved in real estate. I just focus on football, and that is obviously a big deal for me.
So, I mean, I can't imagine you were probably showing a house and then maybe like the Seahawks just made a giant trade or the Vikings just made. Do you have a good story from that when you're trying to maybe close out a deal and then an NFL team's trying to close out a trade?
Yeah, last year, I remember what it was. Last year, I remember I was doing an important showing, and I remember there were like, it was during training camp, and there were like 3 injuries at once, and it was just obviously you don't want to see injuries happening. But I remember it was, I think Derwin James was the big one, and then there was the Jets running back had one, and somebody else had one as well, and I was like, it all happened literally in like a 10-minute span. And I remember that all happening. I was like, you're trying to show a house and you're trying to be respectful, but you also want to not miss what's going on. So I think that's one that's pretty notable, but there have been other stuff, a player getting cut, a player getting signed, a player getting traded. Those things always happen. I remember before I closed this deal with PFF, Ryan Ramczyk had his extension happening while I was showing a house as well. So like these things happen all the time because the NFL, there's news happening anytime, everywhere. I mean, Antonio Brown getting traded to the Raiders like happened at 4 a.m. Like, like things could happen at any time with the NFL. There's so many players there. There's 32 teams. Things are happening always. So yeah, there's many stories where things happen when you're not ready for it. but that's how it works. I mean, let's give another example. Andrew Luck retiring happened all of a sudden at like 8:30 on a Saturday night. So like things happen all of a sudden in the NFL. It's what makes it so great. It's what makes the account what made it so great, because like you're able to get everything in one spot. So yeah, the NFL is always busy and things are always happening, and it's a 24/7 thing.
Yeah, so that's a great segue into my next question for you. Sort of, what's your process for when you go about breaking news? It seems like you're always right there when Schefter, Rappaport, all those guys are tweeting. You're tweeting at the same time or even before them sometimes. So what's sort of your process, sort of verifying if something's true and then actually going and tweeting it?
Yeah, so as the account continued to build up over the years, I've become extra careful into making sure whatever is going out is correct information and it's not jumping ahead of the curve. The problem with what we have nowadays with the media is that people try to jump on stuff because it's a juicy headline or it's something that's interesting. You know it's going to get clicks, you'll know it's going to get engagement and retweets and follows. I've become very wary of this stuff to make sure I don't fall into that trap. So like we actually had a lot of those this off season. Like there was one thing that I remember this off season with before Dak Prescott got his extension, there was a bunch of reports that, he was declining 45 million a year and those type of things. And I was like, wait, hold off over here. Let's not jump into that. Let's like find out, first of all, what's even the structure of that contract. Is it actually 45 million a year? How much is guaranteed, whatever? So like, you want to make sure you're not jumping on stuff and you want to be able to verify if it's true. There's another thing with Schefter this year where like he was on Get Up, I believe, and he said like Odell Beckham Jr. would love to play with Tom Brady. All of a sudden that was spun into Odell wants to join the Buccaneers and Tom Brady would approve it or something. Like, you cannot do that. You can't post that without checking exactly what he said. Was he reporting it or was he just talking like we are right now, right? So like I've become very, very, it's one of my main things to make sure to verify and make sure whatever is out there is 100% accurate. Look at both sides. Make sure it's not just coming from one side, but from both sides. If it's the player and the team, you had to make sure you're hearing it from both angles and make sure you're not jumping ahead and screwing one side over. So it's become a very, very important thing for me. And really, before I post anything, I make sure that it's confirmed on all angles.
Yeah, so we actually had Chris Morrison on, and he told us that when he reports a story, it's not about getting the story the fastest, it's about getting the story the right way. So when do you decide that it's time to pull a trigger? When everything's verified, or is there a certain guy that you look up to and you say, all right, he tweeted it, so it's time for me to tweet it?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different angles that you have to look at. So if it's coming directly from like the team Twitter account, it's legit. If it's coming from the agent, it's legit. But if it's coming from an outlet that you might not have heard of or you're not sure about, you're better off waiting up. If you're getting a text from like, let's just say it's from the team, but it's from somebody not the GM, somebody a little bit under him. You want to double check from the other side as well. You always want to make sure it's right, especially if you're going to have a following that is checking your stuff all the time. If you post something that's wrong, I mean, they're going to remember the one thing that was wrong more than 100 things that were right. So you always want to make sure you're getting the right stuff out there. And if you screw up once, everyone's going to be talking about that one screw up. So again, you want to be extra careful that everything you post is 100% accurate and you don't mess up anybody.
So, I mean, I'm sure for your Twitter notifications, you have every beat reporter. How many times a day do you think your phone goes off from Twitter? I mean, I can't imagine.
It's actually, you'll be surprised. I've actually limited the amount of people that have notifications on. I think I have maybe 6 people right now. It's actually, it's not that many. Because I've been able to get a good sense of just where to expect things to come from and when it should happen. So, there's the obvious ones where I do try to, keep an eye on, but for the most part, I've gotten a good sense of when to expect news. Like I know there are a couple of extensions right now that I'm kind of waiting for, but I know it's going to happen very soon. Like, you know what I mean? Like those type of things. And then the other stuff is like, we kind of get emails every morning knowing when, head coach is going to do their press conferences. So you have a good idea of when that's going to happen, so you're able to check in quickly to make sure if anything notable is happening there. But, people think I might have a lot of them. It's actually not true. It's actually very few. My phone does buzz a lot because, again, the NFL has stuff going on all the time. But when it comes to Twitter notifications, it's not as much as people might think.
Now I want to move into this upcoming NFL season. Obviously, right around the corner. Very exciting that football is finally back and underway. The last
14
preseason
days.
games kick off
2
tomorrow.
weeks, yeah.
But I want to ask, what are some teams that you think might surprise us? Maybe teams that didn't make the playoffs last year that you think might find their way in this season or have a bounce back season, or a team that was very good last year and might not be so good this season?
So let's start off with a team that wasn't as good last year, but I think could make a series jump this year. Um, I know a lot of people might not agree with this, but I'm actually very high on the Giants this year. I mean, it kind of really depends on Daniel Jones, as we all know, but like this is a team that last year started 1-7, but like all those losses, besides for one of them, they were in all the games, besides for, the San Francisco game, but they almost beat the eventual Super Bowl champs on Monday Night Football. Their players love Joe Judge. I mean, I know a lot of people think Joe Judge is some crazy guy. Like, no, Joe Judge is a very intense, demanding head coach, but whatever he wants to get done gets done there. And the players really do love him. And then, that defense was a very good defense last year. They're bringing everybody back for the most part. They added Adoree Jackson. I know got hurt the other day, but he should be fine. They added Kenny Galladay to this offense. They're getting Saquon Barkley back. Really, it's all about Daniel Jones. But again, this NFC East, it's so wide open that I feel like they could win that division. And again, going back to Joe Judge, like you got to understand, like I'm here from New York, so I talk to a lot of people here who love the Giants. It's a different vibe there. It's not what, Pat Shermer and Ben McAdoo were, who are great offensive coordinators, but they just couldn't lead a team. Joe Judge, this is him. He's genuine. He's authentic. This is who he is. And the players understand that. Like if you listen to Logan Ryan, you listen to Sterling Shepard, they're all buying into this. So it reminds me a little bit of Tom Coughlin. Yeah, it's tough, but you know what? Football's supposed to be tough. Whenever he's off the field, he's like your best friend. When he's on the field, he expects you to get your job done. So they're going to cut down this roster from 80 to 53. It's going to be the best 53 guys, and then they're going to get rolling here in a couple of weeks against the Broncos. I'm very high on the Giants this year. I'm curious to see how that all goes out, how that all goes down.
So, I mean, you mentioned the Broncos, and yesterday they just named Teddy the quarterback. Do you believe that was the right move for the team?
Yeah, it's interesting because the thing that I think wasn't talked about enough is the fact that their GM, George Payton, came from Minnesota, and he was heavily involved in the process of drafting Teddy Bridgewater. So usually when you have a GM like George Payton who's coming in and he really got all the control there in Denver. So, he's kind of involved in the process as well. And really, if you look at the preseason, Teddy really outplayed Drew Lock. So, for a guy like Vic Fangio, who many think, could possibly be on the hot seat this year, I think it's important that he has a quarterback there who's going to do all the safe things and make sure to manage the game. Their defense is really, really good. Like they have a really good secondary. They have a bunch of really good pass rushers. You just can't have that quarterback who's going to make that one or two mistakes a game that you just cannot afford. And Teddy has historically been able just to manage a game. That's what Denver is looking for. So, I think they're going to start off with him. If they're able to rally off a couple of wins to start the year, it will look like the right decision, right? Obviously, Drew probably has more of the upside moving forward, but then again, this is a team that is just stacked as a roster. That's why everyone loved the idea of Aaron Rodgers going there, because really up and down that roster is great besides for the quarterback. So I think they're looking at Teddy like, hey, Teddy, just do what you've always done, manage the game, hand the ball off, throw the ball here and there, but don't make that terrible interception. Don't fumble the ball. Just get through the game. Let our defense do our thing. Let these receivers of Judy and Sutton and Fant do their thing, and then everything should be fine. So another team, we mentioned the Giants, and then the Broncos could be that team as well. I know they're in a tough division, but if Teddy just does his job, that's a very intriguing team as well.
Now I want to ask about another team that had a good season last year. They nearly beat the Chiefs in the AFC divisional round, the Cleveland Browns. A lot of hype around that team this season. The defense looks good. Quarterback Baker Mayfield had a bounce back year last season. How do you view the Browns this season? Do you think they're ready to really contend for a Super Bowl, or do you think they're maybe another year out?
No, I think this is a very big year for Cleveland football. What was very interesting about the Browns is that, the year before last year, there was so much hype around them, right? They traded for Odell, and it got a little bit too much out of control that they just couldn't live up to it. Last year, going into, there was no hype at all. and they were able just to do their thing and then make the playoffs, then win a game and almost beat the Chiefs, as you said, in the divisional round. So, going into this year, they made a bunch of moves, but it's a bunch of smart, calculated moves, like adding a John Johnson, adding a Troy Hill, adding, an Anthony Walker, adding a Jadeveon Clowney. Like, that defense needed help. Last offseason was about fixing the offensive line by adding Jack Conklin at right tackle, and Jedrick Wills at left tackle. This year was more about the defense, because that was a bit of an issue last year at times, and they really stacked up that defense. I'm more curious just to see how it all pans out, because really, whenever you add so many new pieces to a defense, you want there to be a rhythm there. So we'll see how, they have a pretty tough game to start the year against Kansas City, but from there, it kind of eases off a little bit. I want to see how that all plays out. But again, there are really no excuses there for them. When you look at the AFC North, Pittsburgh, a lot of people think they could take a step back. Baltimore has always been great, and they've given Cleveland some trouble. So I'm curious to see how that all unfolds. But this is division, again, is going to be wide open for them to potentially win it. So no, I think Cleveland has a real chance to make some noise in the AFC. And it's crazy to think about. If you told somebody 10 years ago that Kansas City, Buffalo, and Cleveland will be the top 3 teams in the AFC, they'll think you're crazy. But here we are in 2021, and that's the case.
So, I mean, I want to stick with Cleveland, and Cleveland has one of the best young GMs in the NFL, and Andrew Berry. And as Eagles fans, we know him. He was with us for a little bit, and he's a big decision to make with Baker Mayfield and maybe getting an extension. Do you believe Baker will be extended this season, or do you believe he could potentially be playing on a franchise tag soon?
So the thing with Baker is that he just finished his 3rd year. So he has the 4th year this year. He has a 5th year option next year, and the franchise tag is still a little bit far away. So there's still time for that. But I know they're talking, but it's a little bit interesting because Baker had a phenomenal year last year. The year before that, obviously, he had some struggles. What teams could be worrying about is you don't want to fall into the trap that happened with Carson Wentz and Jared Goff, where you gave them the extension after year 3 and then everything just collapsed from there, right? So there is a scenario where you could say, hey, Baker, let's play it one more year. Let's see what you can do. And if he plays really well, the price could eventually get to as high as $50 million a year. Right now it's around 40. But if the Browns aren't 100% sold on him, that might be the smart thing to do. And it might be a bit of a risk. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure you got the quarterback position right, and you don't mess up your cap for years to come because you ended up getting it wrong. Now, I'm a Baker Mayfield believer, but at the same time, we're talking about some huge money over here, money that Josh Allen just got, that type of money that is what we're talking about. So I could see a scenario where it doesn't get done and they just revisit it again next year. Again, there's still a lot of time until the guy could become a franchise tag or a free agent. There's still time for that. I mean, they could obviously, again, play next year, then tag him and tag him again. They have control over him for a while. But in terms of getting an extension done now, the reason you want to do that is if you're really sold on him, you could get him at 40 million now instead of 50 million next year. That's really what they're looking at. That's what the Eagles did with Carson Wentz, but it just flopped on them. That's what the Rams did with Jared Goff, but it just didn't work out. That's what the Cowboys might have been worried about with Dak Prescott, and they ended up being wrong, and Dak ended up winning there by getting his deal done, a really good deal. So I'm curious to see what ends up happening there. I do know they believe in him, but do they want to see it one more time? That could be a possible scenario right now.
Yeah, so you mentioned Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys, and obviously there's some hype around that football team this year. People think with Dak coming back, potentially CeeDee Lamb, a breakout season coming up for him. Do you think the Cowboys are ready to get back into the playoffs this season after a tough year for them last season? Or do you think that their defense will continue to hold them back?
Yeah, if you really just look back at last year, I mean, the offense was fantastic. I mean, the first 5 weeks with Dak there, it was really just the defense that was holding them back. They made some significant changes on that side of the ball. Obviously, hiring Dan Quinn to be the defensive coordinator, they believe is a very big deal. You look at their draft, I mean, it was basically just all defense. They love Micah Parsons there, who they drafted at, I believe it was 11 or 13. But, it's a defense that they're expecting just to see improvements out of. When you have an offense that's really good, like it's up here, you just want your defense to be over here. You don't want it to be down there. That's what they're hoping for, right? So just be around 50-60% of a defense, not at like 10%, which is what they were last year. So Dallas is another team that I'm very intrigued by. I think the offense is just stacked with receivers. I mean, they're expecting a lot of great things out of Zeke again this year after, he's been a little bit not the same player since getting that extension, but they think he'll be better this year. So offensively, I think they'll be fine. The X factor there really is the defense. And just going back to the offense for a second, I mean, I'm kind of curious to see what happens with Dak and that shoulder injury. And the reason I really bring that up, it's really not a big deal. But when a player is recovering from an ankle injury so much, right? He kind of, I wouldn't say like forgets about the shoulder, but you're not worrying about the shoulder as much. You're not throwing as much. You just want to see your ankle recover. He finally fully recovered from the ankle and he started throwing the ball so much that his shoulder a little bit started getting a little bit painful. And good for him for, not playing through it and saying, hey, I feel something here. And they decided to rest it. So I think he'll be fine and recover. But I just want to see how that all plays out the first few weeks of the season and how he plays as well. But I'm expecting the Cowboys to be very good this year in that NFC East with the Giants, with Washington. I mean, it's a very intriguing division, but that offense is going to do some great things. How the defense plays out, as I said, is the biggest X factor.
And the one team you just forgot to mention is our hometown Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
And look, they're linked to Deshaun Watson. I mean, gut feeling, do you believe that the Eagles trade for a quarterback, or do you believe they stick with Hurts for the entire season and maybe even beyond 2021?
Yeah, it's the thing. Let me just start off with Deshaun. I mean, talking about Deshaun is a little bit tough right now because there's like a bigger aspect to him than just football. And the thing people have to understand is that there's no team or owner that is going to say, hey, yeah, trade 3 first-round picks and 3 young players for this guy who has a big cloud over his head. I mean, the media reaction in Philadelphia would be a little bit crazy, I think, and you guys might know that. So like, unless all the legal stuff is cleared up, I don't see anything happening there yet. I know teams are interested. I know teams are calling. I know teams want to work on a framework of a deal, but to actually make a trade happen with all this stuff happening around him might take a little bit more time. But I'm a believer that they're going to try out Jalen Hurts to start the year and see what he's got. I mean, I know his agent has been talking very highly about him. She thinks he's going to have a very, very big year there in Philadelphia. They have Devontae Smith, they have Jalen Reagor, who they really are excited about for what he's done so far at camp. We'll see what they do with Zach Ertz. I mean, I know people think he'll get locked in on the roster this year. I'm not 100% sure about that. We'll see what happens there. But, it's a team that is kind of wants to win, but they also know they kind of want to rebuild as well. And that's why they have 2 or possibly 3 first-round picks next year. And with all the quarterback carousels that we're seeing around the NFL over the last couple of years, they have enough ammunition to make a trade if they believe Jalen Hurts isn't the guy. I think they really they really want to start with Jalen Hurts and see how that all plays out. I really don't know how competitive they'll be in the division, but again, you never know what's going to happen in football. We've seen crazier things happen. I mean, every year there's a team that everyone thought will be in 4th place and ends up winning the division. That's just how crazy football works. It's not like other sports like basketball where you could, predict who's going to stink and who's going to be great. Football has a bunch of teams here that start off bad and end up being really well. And who knows, that could be the Eagles as well if Jalen Hurts all of a sudden pops out and does really well.
So I mean,
Yeah, so all this talk about quarterbacks, and we got to talk about the MVP award. Obviously, it's an award that's almost always won by a quarterback. Who do you see taking home the award this year? Who are some candidates that you think are in line to win MVP?
I don't want to give you guys like the easy answers, like a Patrick Mahomes or something like that. Let me think for a second. I'm very intrigued by what Seattle has right now. We always talk about Russell Wilson the first half of the year, as he's always the MVP for the first half. Then all of a sudden something happens, he kind of just falls off the MVP conversation. But they hired an offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron from Los Angeles, and that offense is going to be so different this year. And they're finally like listening to Russell Wilson after everything that happened this offseason. So I kind of get the feeling that this is going to be Russ's offense and he's going to do it his way. Like he had a say in hiring Shane Waldron. And I feel like they're working really closely to make it the way he wants it to be. So I'm kind of curious to see how Russell Wilson does this year in that offense. Obviously, that offense is stacked with so many great players. They added a couple of offensive linemen, which is what he wanted. And then when you have Metcalf and you have Lockett, it's just 2 insanely talented receivers. So I kind of like Russell Wilson a lot this year. I know that division is just stacked with so many good teams, but Russell Wilson will be a dark horse candidate for me, and then Justin Herbert will be the other name. I mean, the Chargers are just, we all saw it last year getting thrown into action in week 2, But what he did was really impressive. And I know they really love Brandon Staley. And I know that they added a left tackle in the draft and they added a center in free agency. And that offensive line is going to be great. The weapons are already there. So they're expecting a big leap out of him as well. So those two guys are names to watch for the MVP this year.
I mean, I really like that Herbert prediction because you talked about the offensive line, and last year they were just horrendous. And this year they could be a top 5 offensive line. He gets a healthy Austin Eckler back, and he has Brandon Staley there. And Joe Lombardi, don't forget about him because he came from New Orleans. He was with Peyton and Brees. So I think that Herbert could take the big step in his game. And I mean, you're talking a little bit about the Chargers, and they just got Derwin James back. Do you believe that he could win Defensive Player of the Year?
Yeah, I mean we've seen safeties win it in the past, and there might not defensive player of the year might be a little bit tough. Comeback player of the year could be possible there for a guy coming off an injury. I mean, you never know. I mean, he could for sure win defensive player of the year as well, but there's probably no player that they're more excited about in Los Angeles than Derwin James. I mean, if you look at just the Chargers social account, the amount of videos they post of just him is amazing. So yeah, I mean, Derwin is it's not just the player that he is, it's the energy that he brings to the defense. So he's going to be a big factor there, and he for sure could win that award. I mean, there are a bunch of great players in the NFL who could win it. I think Chase Young is another player who could win it. I mean, so there are a number of great players who could win it, but Derwin is definitely a candidate, and just having him in that defense with Joey Bosa, of course, is huge. And Brandon Staley running things there. I'll give you a little bit of a nugget. Brandon Staley, of course, had Jalen Ramsey the last couple of years with the Rams, and they bonded really well. Ramsey and Derwin James share the same agent, and they've been talking for a while about just how great Staley is. So Derwin is all bought in on Brandon Staley. I think he's gonna have a great year, and Jalen is in his ear telling him everything about Brandon Staley. So I would be very excited about that duo there.
Well, Ari, we want to thank you so much for coming on today. Before we let you go, I have one final question. I know it's August, so it's going to be very early for you to say this, but what's your Super Bowl prediction and who wins the big game?
Ooh, a Super Bowl prediction. It's so early.
Yeah.
It's a very tough one. I'm gonna go with I don't like making predictions because anything could happen. I look like a little bit crazy, but I'm gonna go with yeah, I know. I'm gonna go with the Chiefs and the Seahawks. Okay, I'm gonna go with the Chiefs because I really love the offensive line there. I think that was obviously the one thing that hurt them the most last year, and they revamped it in a very big way. And then Seattle, I don't know. I just have a feeling with that offense there this year, they're going to surprise a lot of people with what they have brewing there with Shane Waldron. I think people are going to be surprised with that. He could be a head coaching candidate if all goes well. So I'm going to pick Seattle with the NFC. We'll see how that goes.
Well, Ari, we want to thank you again for coming on today, and to all our viewers out there, make sure you're checking out Ari on Twitter, and make sure you're checking out what he's been doing with Pro Football Focus. Ari, thank you again. We appreciate it.
For sure. Jacob, you guys are doing a great job. Let's keep in touch. All the best.
Yeah.